And the prophets learn of this, that they will take your head when they learn. Fool. They ordered me to do it.
Following on from the success of Halo Combat Evolved, the careful balancing and relationship between the game's four main enemy types, grunts, jackals, elites, and hunters, was quickly thrown into the blender with the arrival of a sequel. Halo 2 saw the introduction of many new variations of established enemies and completely new ones, such as the flying drones. But they played second fiddle to what was arguably Halo 2's biggest and most polarizing addition to the roster of enemies: the Brutes. Originating from the barren and scarred planet of Doisak with twice the gravity as Earth, the Brutes have a unique and exaggerated aesthetic that sets them apart from every other species within the Covenant, trading the signature bright and glossy purples for brown leather wraps and crudely forged hunks of grey and red metals, sharp blades, crude but violently effective weaponry, and a passion for hammers. How did these hulking, aggressive primates come to find their place in the Halo universe? How do they impact Halo's carefully crafted Covenant dance? And how did they change throughout the years? With a job this big, I couldn't go at it alone, so I enlisted the help of a good friend who's got some hands-on experience in dealing with the Covenant. What? As we examine the history of the Brutes.
Hello there guys, gals, ladies and gentlemen, my name is BillPill, and today on Halo Revisited, we're looking back at the history of everyone's favorite monkeys, aside from Harambe, rest in peace, Prince, the Brutes, or as they're technically called, the Jiralhane. These handsome-looking devils have got a long and complicated record of participation in the Halo series, appearing in some games, but then being completely absent in others, and taking on very different appearances from game to game. Their presence in the enemy sandbox has changed a lot over the years as well, with different roles and specializations within the Covenant's ranks. Beginning with, of course, Halo 2. From the mind of Shikai Wang, or as he was fondly referred to by the folks at Bungie as Sheik, Wang was a senior artist at Bungie and drew up some simple designs for the Brutes. In his early sketches, you can see a rough idea of what the Brutes would eventually become, albeit missing an eye and going for more of a Doom vibe, lacking any kind of human facial features and being cybernetically enhanced in some way. After a bit more trial and error, Wang and the others at Bungie settled on a look that was, broadly speaking, more human in appearance than what had come before, with the greatest strength of this design being the flexibility for more facial expressions from the Brute characters. Once the design was settled on, it was off to the races for Bungie, and they set about the tricky task of trying to assemble a cathedral out of a hurricane during Halo 2's rough development.
Halo 2 wastes no time in introducing us to the Brutes in the very first cutscene of the game, setting up the elite Thelvadami, who would later become the Arbiter, and Tartarus, chieftain of the Brutes, being symbolic of the larger conflict and negative sentiment that was brewing between these two warrior races. In many ways, standing in opposition to the elites who were honorable, almost Shakespearean, and normally quite by the books as warriors, the Brutes are savage, prone to outbursts of anger, and are remorseless in their tactics. The name Brute sums them up rather aptly, not just in their nature but also their appearances. They're about as similar to simian animals like monkeys or gorillas as they are to a rhinoceros or type of dinosaur, with incredibly thick grey or tan-coloured skin, a layer of brown fur covering most of their torsos, arms, and parts of their faces. Of course, all capped off with
a great big bushy beard.
First encountering them as a proper enemy during the mission Gravemind, the Brute ranks are usually distinguished by a few factors like their choice of weapon and some subtle differences in armor, but nothing quite as obvious as the stark changes in color for the elites or grunts. The lowest ranking Brutes under the command of Tartarus, the Miners, have minimal armor and will usually die from one headshot. They have leather bandolier straps, some bicep guards, and that's about it. While their armor might not offer the same levels of protection as Brutes of a higher status or even the elites, don't let this fool you. Brute miners can take quite a bit of punishment before going down, a common trait throughout all the Brute classes in Halo 2. Above them are the Mages, who have metal helmets, shoulder armor, slightly better health, and are usually seen wielding Brute plasma rifles, Covenant carbines, and occasionally Brute shots. They're even rarely seen with human shotguns, likely due to the shotgun's crude and simplistic killing potential like other Brute weapons. In a similar vein to the mages are brute captains, again having the same style of armor with the main difference being a red holographic flag attached to their backs with 3 slashes, representing the 3 fingers and claws that brutes have. And the most rare of the brute classes in the game is the Honor Guard. Also the first type of brute enemy that you fight, the rank of Honor Guard was promptly stolen from the elites during the early hours of the Great Schism. Again, not possessing any kind of shielding system, these brutes have got red and gold glowing ornamental armor and an energy staff that they use for ceremonial purposes, but are never seen using them offensively in-game. Seen throughout the game as a devoted servant of the prophets, especially Truth, there's Tartarus, the chieftain of the brutes, being the representative of the entire Jurulhane race. With this prestigious title, you'd think there'd be a unique set of armor too? Well, not really. The main difference with Tartarus is a gold pauldron on his left shoulder that he eventually attaches an elite skull to during the Great Schism. He has the signature leather bandoliers and other minimalist pieces of armor that the lower rank brutes have. Unlike others of his species, Tartarus is obviously getting a little long in the tooth, with lighter coloured hair and quite the mohawk as well. I wonder how much Farrah Fawcett spray he uses to keep that up all day. He's also the only brute encountered in Halo 2 to wield a gravity hammer called the Fist of Rukt, an immensely powerful and culturally important object passed down through the generations, and is able to grant the user with a near impenetrable shield.
The brutes in Halo 2 function kind of like a cross between the elites and the Flood, being able to lead squads of Covenant-like elites, but also not being afraid to charge you at a moment's notice, and violate social distancing rules like the Flood. They're probably known best for their Berserk animation, which typically happens when the last brute remaining in a pack will drop everything and charge the player on all fours, going full fucking yaga! In this state, the brutes are difficult to kill, moving at faster speeds than the player, and will only stop if you're fortunate enough to be standing on top of a really big pole to get out of their way. In order to differentiate them further from the elites, the Berserk ability for the brutes was a late addition to the game from Bungie, and due to how bad Halo 2's development crunch was, there wasn't sufficient playtesting done to balance it.
It's hard to not criticize the introduction of the brutes to Halo's sandbox, as it was handled with all the grace and humility of a drunk person trying to go down some stairs. They aren't really all that fun to fight against. They haven't got the quick reflexes and diversity of tactics like the elites. They aren't your typical cannon fodder like the grunts or jackals. They're just really angry bullet sponges. However, the brutes marked a significant change in Halo's direction for story and gameplay. With the elites now teaming up with humanity, the Covenant found themselves without their best warriors. The lethality and tactical precision of the elites was soon replaced with sheer strength and overwhelming force. But most importantly, the brutes were a little bare, shall we say, and were in major need of some upgrades if they were to replace the elites as the Covenant's primary armed force.
Going into Halo 3 and subsequently ODST, Bungie knew all too well that if the brutes were to be the main enemy, they needed to be more fun to fight and challenging in ways other than how many bullets they could soak up. The result was again, divisive. Originally, the brutes were going to use metal shields similar to the ones used by the jackals, but this was changed in favor of a more traditional power armor like the elites, with energy shields that vary in strength depending on the rank of the brute. Unlike other types of shielded enemies in Halo, once a brute attains enough damage, their armor will overload and break, being unable to recharge. Due to this mechanic, the brutes were kind of like the elites from Wish.com, and instead of ducking for cover and waiting for their shields to recharge before attacking the player again, they'd normally burst into a fit of rage and berserk at the player, similar to Halo 2, but nowhere near as fast or furious. Okay, anyway. They also featured a very different type of AI behavior that allowed them to work better in unison with other brutes, sometimes throwing grenades together or responding aggressively to the death of one of their pack brothers. Though, when their armor breaks, they'd be caught in a stun animation, making melee combat and dodging them easy, lacking any sort of major consequences for getting up close to them, unlike in Halo 2.
Another major change to the brutes was their look. In place of the shaggy, long hair and worn leather bandoliers, were various colors of new power armor, trimmed goatees, and one long strip of dark hair running across their scalps. These brutes have more pronounced mouths and teeth, slightly narrower faces, and very noticeable red eyes that just stare right into your soul. They also have an undersuit, instead of running around butt naked all the time, that looks to be a mix of conventional cloth and leather, held on by straps with more complexity and a diamond pattern for certain ranks. There are a few variants of brute armor that change between ranks. The first type, worn by the brute miners, has very sparse amounts of turquoise-colored armor with a lot of their undersuit and bare skin exposed. The mages use a heavier variant of this armor with more pieces covering their body, like their upper legs and arms. The second type is again a lighter form of armor, worn by jump pack brutes, all of which have a slightly more pronounced and aggressive looking helmet and less armor on their shoulders and arms, keeping the weight to a minimum to maintain the efficiency of their jump packs. Next are the brute bodyguards and captains, who share a heavier type of armor with an exaggerated samurai-esque helmet that extends past their heads. And ranking above them all are the chieftains. The standard chieftains, always seen with a gravity hammer, wear black and crimson armor with a massive, intricately detailed headdress, a large wrist-mounted shield on their left arm, and varying types of equipment to aid them in battle. The war chieftains opt for a broader selection of weapons, utilizing dismounted plasma cannons and fuel rod guns, and have gold armor with even more elaborate helmets that look like they could be used to impale you as a last-ditch effort. The final type of brute are the camouflaged stalkers, that use the same dark diamond-patterned undersuit as the chieftains, with black, lightweight armor, a singular red eyepiece in the center of their helmets, likely some type of thermal imaging system allowing them to better spot targets in low visibility environments where you commonly see them. The brute faction was further expanded upon with the introduction of weapons and vehicles like the spiker, spike grenade, mauler, gravity hammer, firebomb, chopper, and prowler, which all helped to cement the brute's status as the new head honchos of the Covenant army. However, Bungie seemed too preoccupied with making the brutes similar to the elites at a surface level that they didn't stop to remember what made the elites so fun to fight in the first place from a technical standpoint. They were almost equal to the player in terms of their capabilities and could genuinely give you a run for your money, whereas the brutes don't. They should be unpredictable and physically imposing. They should be deadly at hand-to-hand combat, but in Halo 3 they're kind of a joke to deal with. They're definitely more fun to fight than Halo 2's brutes, but they still weren't quite proving their worth as good additions to Halo's sandbox. And for better or worse, Bungie weren't quite done with the brutes yet.
The brutes in Halo Reach feel like a mishmash of how they worked in Halos 2 and 3, with the majority of them being unshielded, only having sparse amounts of armor, but lots of health like Halo 2, while the chieftains maintain the energy shield and grab hammer from Halo 3. It's a strange mix that aims to keep the brutes closer in line to how they appeared and acted in Halo 2, as Reach is a prequel after all, while not completely undoing the changes that Halo 3 made, and of course, it's hard not to talk about their appearance. Yikes.
This was one of those choices that always confused me and apparently quite a lot of others. The brutes went from being up against Chewbacca in a contest for hairiest character in science fiction to now looking like Will Smith would slap you if you made a joke about how bald they were.
Keep my
Roots.
name out your fucking mouth!
What, was that too soon? The brute miners in Reach particularly feel like a big departure from what came before, lacking the red eyes of Halo 3's brutes and practically any hair for that matter. No little Van Dyke beard or mohawk for these fellas. They obviously found the hair removal cream and used it a little too liberally.
I like your cut, G.
Instead, the brutes in Reach have grey-coloured skin with Forerunner-inspired tattoos covering a majority of their bodies. Like the mages in Halo 2, they have little metal caps to protect their grey matter, with a few rounds from a headshot weapon like the Magnum or DMR being enough to take it off, and another shot to the skull to unalive them. Keeping with Reach's muted and gritty colour palette, the brute miners have dark blue, almost grey-coloured armour, but you honestly wouldn't know because it only covers their chest, upper arms, and hips. Yet somehow they can use armour lock? The Captain Mages have a little more armor to keep them protected, with a similar silhouette to the Captain Power armor from Halo 3, just without the energy shielding. And finally, there's the Chieftains, again seen using the gravity hammer. They're also quite fond of the fuel rod cannon, plasma launcher, and detached plasma turrets. Their armor is primarily a bronze shade with large shoulder pauldrons and a helmet that keeps the same ornamental style to those from Halo 3. But a little smaller, and with a metal visor covering the top of their face with menacing orange lights looking like eyes. They've also got a diamond pattern undersuit like the brutes from Halo 3, and are the only brute ranks to have a beard, and honestly, not a bad one at that. The brutes in Reach can only be assassinated unless they are completely unaware of your position, not just you popped active camo and it disappeared for a bit. They have to have never seen or even know of your existence in order to be assassinated, which is a really strange feature in the gameplay. The collection of brute weapons shrunk considerably in this game, with just the spiker and gravity hammer, leaving the brutes in a pretty uninteresting place for Reach, both in aesthetics and gameplay. They were also the first version of the brutes to not go berserk when either the rest of their pack died or their armor was broken. It kind of feels like they weren't really needed. Unlike Halo 2s and 3s where the brutes had an integral connection to the stories being told in those games, they feel like a last-minute addition, or they were just shoehorned in as a continuity obligation for Reach because they were missing from Combat Evolved. Moving forward, it was time for the brutes to take a seat on the bench and let the rest of Team Covenant do their jobs. Other than some minor appearances in the first Halo Wars with a chieftain leader and some low-poly units, the brutes were pretty much absent from the Halo franchise for a while, aside from one short cameo in Halo 4's pre-rendered opening cutscene. For all the canon this ruins with the wrong Spartan armor and elite designs, the brute chieftain looks sick, and kinda makes me wish we got to see more of them. The chieftain even got a few pieces of concept art dedicated to him, going for a bulky, orc-like towering monster to a design that looks reminiscent of Halo 3's chieftain, with a similar black and crimson color scheme, wrist-mounted shield, a gravity hammer, and baboon-like face with the scary, sharp teeth to match. I mean, look at those things! You could pin someone to a wall with teeth that long.
The brutes would then make their long-awaited return and see updated designs for the graphical remaster of Halo 2. Staying true to the original while making them more palatable for the modern era, the Halo 2 Anniversary brutes are a lot of people's favorite iteration of the Jiralhane, including mine, and it's understandable to see why. Both Blur Studios, the company responsible for Halo 2 Anniversary's incredible cutscenes, and Saber Interactive, who produced all the assets and models for the game, looked closely at the original in-game models and the concept art to come up with a faithful adaptation of what we saw in 2004. The leather bandoliers and straps, the crudely forged metal armor and skull caps, the varying degrees of facial and bodily hair between the brutes all remained close to Bungie's original vision. Tartarus looked suitably grizzled and imposing with his blood-red eyes and facial scars. It's hard to fault this look for the brutes, and a lot of the design language would carry over to Halo Wars 2.
For the first time since Halo 3, the brutes were back as the main antagonists of a Halo game, now being the leaders of a new faction called the Banished, with their top dog, or I guess monkey, being the War Master, Atriox. The cutscenes were once again created by Blur Studios, and without the constraints of the Covenant design language holding them back, the folks at Creative Assembly, 343, and Blur really went ham. The black and red colors, sharp jagged edges, abundance of blades, and mix of various types of tech and gear from multiple factions are a stark contrast to the pristine, glossy purple hues of the Covenant. Designs like the Chopper and Brute Shot obviously served as the basis for the Brute's aesthetic in this game, but dialed all the way up. Each piece of armor or each weapon and vehicle looks brutally utilitarian and dangerous. The armor seen on various Brute characters throughout the game says it all about these guys. They're edgier than a Linkin Park cover band, and they aren't here to mess around. Halo had found a proper successor to the Covenant. The Banished were almost universally loved by Halo fans, with many praising the mix of classic and brand new art styles that Creative Assembly and Blur managed to create. The brutes were suddenly more popular with Halo fans than they ever had been, and everyone was crying out for more. It was a recipe for success that 343 were no doubt taking notes on while developing their next Halo title.
The Banished jumped from the realms of real-time strategy game to first-person shooter in Halo Infinite, bringing over many of their savage, battle-worn aesthetics and that signature black and red color scheme. Though it wasn't off to a smooth start. In the first look gameplay demo for Halo Infinite that copped a lot of hate from the gaming community at large for its underwhelming graphical presentation, it was the brutes that unfortunately caught the brunt of this ridicule. Coined by the Halo community as Craig, the legend, the homie himself, this brute broke the internet with memes, video edits, 3D renders, and DeviantArt fanfics that skyrocketed the Halo franchise and, by extension, the brutes to new heights of popularity. For all the wrong reasons. Slowly, people began analyzing and critiquing the designs of the Banished brutes in Infinite, comparing them to Halo Wars 2's and noting the lack of texture and detail that was previously seen in Blur's cutscenes and the artwork for the game. Then came the announcement. Almost single-handedly, one brute managed to delay Microsoft's biggest title for that year. And so, we waited.
Fast forward to November of 2021 and Halo Infinite releases. and if nothing else was praised for its graphical improvements, in particular its art direction, the brutes of course being the stars of the show. Halo Infinite seems to find a pleasing middle ground between the brutes as they were presented in Halo 3, while also roughing them up a bit to better suit the aesthetic of the Banished. The brute miners wear turquoise coloured armour that covers minimal parts of their body with no energy shielding either. Like previous types of brute miner, one shot to take off their skull cap and another to put them down for good. An entirely new class of brute known as the Berserker is probably the most interesting addition to the brute ranks, taking the concept of the Berserk animation and making an entire enemy class based around it. These brutes typically don't use weapons and will rush the player to attack them with melee hits from their wrist blades. Then there's the brute captains, wearing heavier armor with more powerful weapons and the jump pack graciously borrowed from Halo 3's brutes. They can also use the jump pack in tandem with their physical strength to deliver powerful melee attacks. The next rank is the brute specialist, called as such due to their proficiency with human weapons. Seen on the battlefield with bulldog shotguns or commando rifles, these brutes are known for their purple colored armor and weak energy shields. The brute captain mages in gold armor with their energy shields are known for their use of heavy weapons like the Spanker rocket launcher, which isn't fair at all, I should add. That's our gun, alright? Not theirs. The brute stalker, a class that has seen quite a bit of alteration since their first appearance in Halo 3, utilizes anti-vehicle or sniper-based weapons like the skewer and shock rifle. These brutes have a recognizable glowing singular eye and antennas on their armor, and of course there's the chieftain. The first class of chieftain with the iconic black and red armor don't have energy shields, instead relying on their heavy armor to take a majority of the damage they receive. There's also the white and gold chieftain ultras, as if chieftains weren't enough of a pain already, who have energy shields and will literally jump across the map with a gravity hammer to get you. If you've played the final Harbinger boss fight on Legendary, you know exactly what I mean. And who could forget the brute bosses in the game? Tremonius, Bassus, the brothers Hyperius and Tavares, and of course Escharum. Infinite's brutes are the culmination of years worth of trial and error, finally getting a respectable place within Halo's roster of enemies, and working in tandem with the elites as opposed to being second-rate replacements for them. The last brute remaining in the pack will discard their weapon and berserk at the player, however instead of getting stun-locked easily like Halo 3 or being too bullet-spongy and completely unfaltering in their charge like Halo 2, these brutes can be temporarily slowed by shooting off parts of their armor, causing them to stumble. Like Reach, there is a mix of shielded and unshielded brutes and many different ranks that help to further pad out the enemy sandbox, with brute miners being similar to cannon fodder like grunts and jackals, brute captains mixing aspects of Halo 2's brutes with high health and the quick movement of Halo 3's jump pack brutes, the stalkers essentially being used to fill a previously unoccupied role of anti-vehicle, and the chieftains feeling like challenging mini-bosses in a similar vein to the hunters. The brutes in Halo Infinite add variety and an element of chaotic fun to enemy encounters that always keep the player on their toes. While they got off to a rocky start as a rushed and unrefined addition to Halo 2's collection of Covenant enemies, and seemed to stumble a bit with later iterations in Halos 3 and Reach, the brutes finally seem to be coming into their own and are now a worthy addition to Halo's Covenant dance, or I guess Banished Boogie? The brutes have managed to establish themselves as one of the main driving forces for Halo's story going forward, and are a faction to be reckoned with, utilizing unrelenting tactics and overwhelming force to crush their enemies. With potentially another 10 years of content ahead for Infinite with story DLC likely on the cards, there's no doubt we'll be seeing much more of the Banished and their continuing impact on Halo's universe, for better or for worse.
Dumb apes. You want breakfast? You gotta catch it.
I don't know if you want me to say this here, but embrace monkey.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Before you lads all head out, I've got to plug Bill. BillPill is an excellent content creator who looks at not just Halo, but plenty of other games as well, and like me has a passion for music in video games. When I say this guy's a top bloody bloke, I mean it. He pulled like 99% of the weight for this video, and after collaborating with him on his channel before, I thought I'd return the favor. He's made some amazing videos for this platform, and the fact he doesn't have more subs is ludicrous. So check out his channel, drop him a subscription, watch all his videos, like them all, and if you don't, a berserking Halo 2 brute will visit you at 3 AM. I'm not kidding, it will happen. Not to mention he's a part of the exclusive Marty O'Donnell Tick of Approval Club, of which there aren't very many members. Thanks for agreeing to do this, Bill. His channel and socials will be linked down in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, well, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it around, backsmack the bell button. I don't know what it does, but do it anyways, you know? You've got all those buttons there, might as well push them. You wouldn't. You're way scared.